Josh Shapiro questions Jasmine Crockett's loyalty. She exposes his secret deal with Republicans. The room was tense. The kind of tense where you could hear the buzz of the fluorescent lights above, every flicker feeling like a drumbeat in the silence. Josh Shapiro leaned forward across the committee table, his eyes fixed on Jasmine Crockett. "Congresswoman," he said, his voice sharp, "people are questioning where your loyalty truly lies. Are you working for your constituents, or for your own agenda?" A murmur ran through the room. The cameras zoomed in. Viewers at home leaned closer to their screens. Jasmine didn't flinch. She had faced worse: poverty, prejudice, and political betrayal. But this wasn't just about defending herself. This was about telling the truth. She took a slow breath, her mind flashing back to a week earlier, when she'd stumbled across something in a stack of misplaced budget drafts, a private memo outlining a quiet deal Shapiro had struck with several Republican leaders. The memo wasn't illegal, but it was underhanded. It cut funding for community health programs in exchange for political favors. Programs that served veterans, children, and the elderly in rural and urban districts alike. Jasmine could have stayed silent. It wasn't her fight, but she thought of Ms. Rodriguez, the 73-year-old woman she'd met in Dallas, who relied on one of those clinics to get her blood pressure medicine. She thought of the young veterans who had told her they couldn't get mental health care unless these programs stayed funded. She thought of her late father, who always told her, if you have the chance to stand up for people who can't fight back, you take it. So when Josh Shapiro tried to paint her as disloyal, Jasmine stood. "My loyalty," she said, her voice calm but carrying through the chamber. "It's to the people who elected me. To the ones who work 2 jobs and still can't afford health care. To the parents skipping meals so their kids can eat. And to every veteran who fought for this country but is still fighting to survive when they get home." She reached into her folder and pulled out the memo. "This," she held it up for the cameras, "is what loyalty to special interests looks like. A deal to strip funding from communities in exchange for political favors. You signed it, Josh. And while you were asking about my loyalty, you forgot to check your own." Gasps filled the room. Shapiro's face flushed. The chair banged the gavel for order, but the truth had already spread. Reporters were typing furiously, phones were lighting up, and in that moment, the balance of power in the room shifted. But Jasmine didn't stop there. She didn't want this to be about revenge. It had to be about change. "We can do better than this," she said, turning to the entire committee. "We can stop treating politics like a game of favors and start treating it like a duty. Because the people we serve aren't bargaining chips, they're human beings." By the end of the hearing, something unexpected happened. A Republican member, someone Jasmine had often clashed with, came over quietly and said, "If you're serious about fixing this, I'll work with you." Weeks later, the funding was restored. Clinics stayed open. Veterans got their therapy sessions back. Ms. Rodriguez sent Jasmine a handwritten note that simply read, "Thank you for remembering us." And as Jasmine read it, she realized something. Kindness in politics isn't weakness, it's the most powerful form of strength. Because when you stand for people, even your opponents can become allies. And sometimes, loyalty isn't about who you stand with, it's about who you stand for. The night after the hearing, Jasmine sat alone in her small DC apartment. The city outside was alive with lights and sirens. But she barely noticed. On her coffee table lay the memo, now front-page news, beside her phone, which wouldn't stop buzzing. Messages from reporters, old friends, strangers across the country. Some praised her, others warned her she'd made enemies. But Jasmine didn't care about the politics of it. She cared about the people. Her thoughts went back to that clinic in Dallas, the one with the peeling paint on the walls, where the air conditioner rattled in the summer heat, but where the nurses greeted every patient like family. She remembered Ms. Rodriguez clutching her hand and whispering, "They're closing the clinic next year, what will we do?" That memory had been the quiet fuel behind her courage in the hearing. Meanwhile, Josh Shapiro wasn't sleeping much either. For years, he'd been known as a dealmaker, a man who could get legislation through by cutting corners others wouldn't dare. But now his name was tied to something far uglier, betraying the very communities he claimed to serve. In the days that followed, political analysts debated whether Jasmine's move had been bold or reckless. Late-night talk shows ran clips of her holding up the memo, and social media exploded with hashtags like #StandWithJasmine and #LoyalToThePeople. But the real turning point came a week later, when Jasmine traveled back home. She didn't hold a press conference or make speeches. Instead, she visited the very communities that had almost lost their funding. She shook hands with veterans at a rehab center. She sat with nurses who told her how many patients they'd have to turn away if the programs disappeared. She knelt beside a little girl named Sarah who was coloring in the waiting room while her mother filled out insurance forms. "You're Jasmine," Sarah said, recognizing her from TV. "My mom says you made the bad man stop taking our doctor away." Jasmine's throat tightened. She managed a smile. "Your doctor's staying right here," she told her. In private moments, Jasmine wondered how long the goodwill would last. Politics could be a cruel machine. Today's hero was tomorrow's target. And she knew Shapiro wasn't finished with her. But something else was happening, too. People, ordinary voters, were starting to write letters, call offices, and show up at town halls demanding transparency. Politicians who normally ignored community meetings were suddenly attending them. Even in Washington, where cynicism was currency, there was a shift. That same Republican colleague who had approached her after the hearing kept his word. Together, they drafted a bipartisan bill to protect essential health funding from being used as a bargaining chip in budget negotiations. The bill wasn't flashy, but it mattered. One night, as Jasmine left her office, she saw Shapiro standing by the elevator. For a moment, she thought he might confront her. Instead, he sighed. "You cost me a lot, Crockett," he said quietly. "But you also made me remember why I came here in the first place." It wasn't an apology, but it was something. Months later, Jasmine was back in Dallas. The clinic had fresh paint now, thanks to a local volunteer drive. Ms. Rodriguez was there, sitting in the sun with a group of other patients, laughing like they had all the time in the world. "You kept your promise, Ms. Rodriguez told her. Jasmine smiled. "We all did." And in that moment, she understood something she'd been chasing her whole career, that loyalty is not about party lines or political power, it's about human lives. And when you choose to stand for them, you don't just change policy. You change hearts. The cameras might have moved on. The headlines might have faded. But for the people whose lives had been touched, Jasmine's stand would be remembered for years. Because true loyalty leaves no one behind.